Hello, and welcome to the LO Teacher Podcast. Today on the podcast, we are going to look at 6 types of activities, audio activities, that teachers can make by just doing simple recordings on some free software like Audacity. Now, a lot of teachers are hesitant, I think, to make their own audio content, and that's kind of a shame because it's really easy to do. In fact, what's kind of interesting is that the process of making written content and the process of making audio content is almost the same. In fact, a lot of the shortcuts that we use in audio editing are the exact same shortcuts that you would use if you were to write a longer passage. For example, Command C is copy, Command V is paste, Command X is cut, and then you can paste it. So there's just a lot of the same tools that we use for text we can use with an audio editor. And once you get used to using an audio editor, it's kind of liberating actually, because it's so easy to do, like I'm doing right now. And I think it's more enjoyable than writing, although that will depend on the person, I suppose. But it's definitely not more difficult. Now, one big misconception a lot of teachers have about creating audio content is they think that you have to have a specialized skill and specialized equipment and training. That is absolute hogwash. And to prove it, just think of it this way. Think about how much training you had to have to become a good writer, but then think about how much training you had to speak your language. None, right? So literally all you have to do is open up an audio editor, click the record button, and start talking. So as long as you have a mic, and most laptop computers have a built-in mic, and you have some audio software, for example, Audacity, which is a freeware tool you can use, then the sky's the limit. You can record pretty much as you want and about anything that you would like to talk about. But today we'll go over 6 simple things that teachers can do, 6 simple audio ideas or audio content suggestions that they can use to create their first listening tasks. All right, so let's start with the first. The first one, the easiest one by far, is just to do short talks. And we actually have a segment on LO called Talks, and it just does this. We hire people from around the world to give an anecdote. They just tell some little story about their life. And then we use it on the website. And I think it is maybe the most interesting bit of content that we have on the website. And again, it's super easy to do. And usually what I do for a talk is I tell the people that do the recordings, just talk about something that happened in your life recently. What's something that was kind of interesting or something that was memorable? And to make it good audio content, it should have a mini story arc. By that, I mean you started to do one thing, and then something happened, and you had to pivot and react and change your plans or whatever, and you did another thing. Or you did something, and something noticeable or memorable happened when you did it. So the story that I often tell for the people that do the activity for LO is I say, look, it could be as easy as talking about buying milk. So I give a story about I woke up, I wanted to have cereal, but I didn't have any milk. So I went in my car and I drove to the supermarket, but the supermarket wasn't open yet. So then I drove to a convenience store. When I got there, they had milk, but they didn't have the milk that I wanted. I decided just to get the milk they had there. And then while I was there, I got some coffee. Because I like the coffee from the 7-Eleven. It's much better than the coffee at my house. Then I drove home, and then I had my cereal with milk and the coffee. But I was kind of sad because I like to have bananas in my cereal, and the convenience store doesn't sell bananas, but the supermarket does. So I wasn't able to have bananas with my cereal, but still, I had the good coffee. Now, that little story is actually highly useful for students because it's kind of a natural way of explaining the story. It's something that you would kind of tell a friend or whatever if you're having a discussion. And there's a lot of comprehensible input in there, a lot of rich comprehensible input in there, and the students can learn a lot from this little story. So giving a short talk is just the easiest way to get started. Just start saying little anecdotes. And by the way, if you are interested in sharing your anecdotes, you can even get paid for it. Elo actually pays, I think it's $50 for 10 anecdotes or $25 for 5 anecdotes. And each anecdote just has to be a minute long. And all you have to do is talk. Another easy thing you can do is make compilations. So we have an activity on Elo called Mixer, and we have 6 people answer the same question. So maybe you don't want to be the voice of the recording, but you have lots of friends and family and colleagues. So you could just do short recordings and then compile them together into a longer listening, or you could have them separate as anecdotes like the previous one. But I like to kind of make these man-on-the-street activities like we have on Mixer, where I'll ask 6 people the same question, and then I'll put them together on one audio file. This is very easy to do with a tool like Audacity. So you just do the separate recordings, and then you just combine them in the auto editing tool. Mixer is one of the more popular activities on Elo, and I like Mixer because it helps the students stay focused on the same topic, and they can compare. They can kind of relate every response to each other. So I think that helps them cognitively as they listen. And again, it's a super easy thing to do. You could also do something that's scripted. So, for example, you could write a news story. We have this in the News Center activity on Elo. We also have some longer readings that we narrate. We do a voiceover of the content. So you could have something that's scripted and you just read it and you basically make it multimodal. It could be a reading task or it could be a listening task. This is a good way to get started if you don't really have any ideas at first that you want to share, or you have a specific thing that you want to target. I personally don't like the scripted material so much, but again, making funny news stories or interesting news stories or short articles can be a lot of fun for some people, so that's another option. Okay, so now we've gone over 3 things. Let's go over 3 more. Now, you could also just do the longer form interviews, the conversations that we have on Elo. This is a bit trickier because now you run into the problem with the mic. So if you have 2 people talking, to have really good audio capture, you need a mic in front of both people. But you could easily do this with your phone. So you could just kind of pass the phone back and forth and have a conversation. But you got to make sure that you get the microphone in the right place, in the same place each time, or else the audio will be a little bit distorted. Another thing that you can do actually is you could use an AI tool to do the voice for you. So you can do ElevenLabs. ElevenLabs is a free tool where you can just put text in the input box and it will narrate what you said. And if you want to have multiple people speaking, what you can do is create the recording for, let's say, the male speaker, and then create a recording for a female speaker, choose a different voice, and then just fuse them together in Audacity. I do that sometimes. It's a lot of fun. And that actually is a really fun project for students. Students like to do that. So sometimes I'll have the students write a conversation, write a script, and then they will do the voiceover on ElevenLabs if they don't want to do it themselves, and then they'll just fuse it together with Audacity. And then finally, there's a couple other things you can do. One, you can do like really short bits. For example, you can model vocabulary. We do this a lot on Elo, where you could have a vocabulary item and maybe you explain the definition of the word and you give a couple examples. So that's kind of a fun, easy thing to do if you want to do like target specific things. You could also do that for grammar. Also, sometimes similar to the news stories and the articles, if there's, for example, like a grammar explanation page, I sometimes will narrate that. I'll just read it. Often I'll use Loom for that so they can actually see my face, but you can also just use Audacity. So if the students want, they can actually read the boring explanation, and then they can also listen at the same time. And, one of the reasons why you might want to consider doing audio is because students can multitask. Students are very busy, and listening and studying can be something that they do while they are commuting or walking somewhere or exercising at the gym or whatever. So by creating your own audio content, you allow for more learner opportunities for students, and they can learn in different environments. They always don't have to be at a table with a book and a pencil, etc. And that's it. So those are 6 easy things you can make. Again, super simple, super simple to make. I highly recommend that teachers start creating their own audio content. And like I said earlier, I promise it's just as easy as writing scripted content. In fact, it's actually easier and faster. And that's it. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and please stay tuned for more.